Hello, everybody. Welcome into rounding third. I thought that was you sending your tweet.
No.
Welcome into rounding third. If you're just joining us, we just finished up an episode of in the clubhouse with the Nats report. Go check that out for all your latest Nationals news and updates. It's lots of good stuff. So if you want all your Nats stuff, that's where you go find it. This show, rounding third, we're talking about the rest of baseball. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus, joined as always by my friend and co-host.
Haden Raymer.
Today it's gonna be uh, today we're gonna focus more on a tight wild card slash trade deadline race, right? Especially in the NL. If you look around the league, there's about 14 or 15 of the teams are within like 5 games of each other. Now that's in AL and NL around the whole league, but there's a large portions of teams at that midway point of the season that are right next to each other, and it's making things very complicated for what we can try to expect at the trade deadline, especially in the NL wildcard race, where there are 9 teams that are separated by 4 games or less from the second wild card all the way down to the Marlins, I believe.
Colorado.
Rockies,
They're in the
yes.
same spot. Yeah. The last two teams in the
So
National League.
Right. All but 2 teams in the National League are kind of in it right now. And it leads to a really interesting question of who's going to buy and who's going to sell, because nobody knows what's going to happen. The Mets just pulled off, they were the hottest team in baseball for a week after Grimace threw out a first pitch, right? You know, uh, great story there.
Yeah.
And then Edwin Diaz comes and gets suspended for 10 games. Because it's the Mets, and whenever they have one good thing happen, 2 bad things have to happen to them, right? Uh, but it's going to be a crazy, crazy, crazy wild card race, crazy trade deadline in the NL. So we're going to talk a little bit about who we think going to be buyers and who we think is going to be sellers. Um, but yeah, let's. What do you say we just jump right into it and start off with the Mets, right? We kind of did a little bit of an intro there on them.
Uh huh.
Uh, they're sitting at an interesting spot, right? And obviously the big news with them is that they just lost Edwin Diaz, right? Star closer for them. They are currently 1.5 games out of that second wild card, 2.5 out of that first wild card. So they're right there in that middle group. What do you expect them to do, and how is this Edwin Diaz situation going to affect their placement on for the trade deadline moving forward?
I mean, obviously they're out Edwin Diaz. A lot of their prospects that they called up, Brett Beatty being the big one, hasn't quite performed to the level that they thought he would. Uh, obviously Kodai Senga has yet to throw a pitch so far this season, which has kind of been a damper for him. It's just I don't know, man. They've gotten hot. This team has never really had playoff aspirations. When you kind of look at I'm sure they themselves had playoff aspirations, but when you look at the rest of the National League, on paper, uh, they didn't look, like one of the more dominant teams in the National League. Uh, and by some miracle, every team in baseball, uh, is just okay. And they're one of those teams that are just okay. I don't think they necessarily need to buy. Just because they have so many prospects that are like right there on the precipice of being major league ready, where it would make a lot of sense to kind of just shed the expiring deals. Hey, maybe if we can get like a cost controlled guy, uh, go and get him, but don't necessarily go acquire some rentals. Uh, Honestly, the biggest thing for the Mets is Pete Alonso.
Right.
Uh, he's a free agent after the season. Uh, he hasn't signed an extension yet, obviously, because he's a free agent after the season. And it's hard to picture Pete Alonso in a uniform other than the Mets. Is that strange thing to say? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, like, you talk about players in the MLB that are great, right? He he doesn't really he's a guy that you're not going to throw into that conversation readily, but he should be up there. Uh he's a really good player, and that was my biggest question with the Mets at this deadline, right? And that's why I think this Edwin Diaz piece of news is the biggest thing, right? Because he is an expiring contract, because Pete Alonso is kind of like the Met right now. Uh, if they fall out of this wild card race, are they going to trade him? Because I haven't heard a lot of things about him resigning. And if I'm Pete Alonso, unless they're giving me the biggest contract, I'm not too inclined to stay with the Mets, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, I mean it's weird. It's a weird situation where, like, if this was, 5, 6 years ago, Pete Alonso would have get a giant bag this offseason. But I mean, if you look at how the offseason played out for a lot of in free agency for a lot of these hitters and all of these players, it doesn't play like that anymore. I think there's a lot of concerns about if he's even a first baseman. A lot of teams probably view him as more of a DH. Uh, the bat, he has a he's a good hitter. But he's not thrown in that conversation of best hitter in baseball. You know, like he's definitely in that second or third tier of MLB hitters. Uh, and so I have a hard time imagining he's going to get the contract that he's looking for. And so that's the thing that I think makes the Pete Alonso case so interesting is, it makes sense to trade him if he's not going to extend, but also, like he's kind of for, some reason, even though the Mets have a Hall of Fame shortstop right now, Pete Alonso is kind of like the face of the Mets. Uh, where the Mets feel more like Pete Alonso's team than Francisco Lindor's team.
Right. And that is an interesting point to be at because that is an important part for these teams. I mean, us with the Nats, Zimmerman was always great, but there was never a thought in anybody's mind to let him leave, right?
Hmm.
He was always going to get whatever he wanted. And I'm not tapped into the Mets fan base the same way that I am with the Nats, right? And it's a much different situation right now. But uh it's a different situation, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's is he that kind of guy that you can't get rid of because he is the face of the Mets? Because you can get rid of faces of teams if they're not firmly established as the Met, the whatever, right?
Hmm.
And what kind of haul would they need to get him in? I don't see the Mets as buyers, period, point blank. I don't think they're going to buy. The question more on my mind is if they're going to stand pat or if they're going to sell.
Mm.
And it's not it's going to be hard to tell. They got a month to figure this out, but I I think they might trade Pete Alonso. We were just kind of having this discussion right before we went on of what teams might want a first baseman. Um, you know,
I mean, yeah, I think of the free agent or rental first baseman, Pete Alonso probably makes the most sense, and he's probably gonna have the most suitors. Uh, it really is. The question is, there's gonna be a market for Pete Alonso. The question is, are the Mets willing to deal him?
right, right. And I don't know if they will be. I think they might be again. I think because of the timing of this Edwin Diaz suspension, and that's not the end. That's not the end all be all. A closer's not going to win. It's not going to be the difference between a buying and a selling team.
Yeah.
But he is, you know, in a close game, you want him out there, right? He is one of the top closers in baseball. Uh, so I think this might push them to sell.
Yeah.
But looking at some of the other ones, and I'm just going to go down the standings here. The Mets had just kind of pulled out because that was part of the intro. I'm going to go down the rest of the standings. I'm going to start at that second wild card, the Cardinals. Right? They're they're still in that mix, even though they're in that second wild card. They're only a game up on the Padres, who are in that third wild card right now. They started off the season really slow. They still have some players uh, that haven't rebounded. Paul Goldschmidt comes to mind there. Uh, they feel like a team that's going to buy, right? I don't expect them to sell, but they feel like a team that's going to buy. Or do you think they're going to stand pat? Because what do they have to? Where would they go upgrade from here?
Upgrade? I mean, like you said, Paul Goldschmidt hasn't been Paul Goldschmidt. Nolan Arenado hasn't been Nolan Arenado, where I mean, Wilson Contreras has been out for a while, where it's a lot of their everyday, like the guys who are supposed to be like the pillar of this team haven't been that. And so like it kind of leaves them in this like weird spot. I mean, they can upgrade in the fringes. Their bench could be improved. Uh, it's just they're kind of like you said in this weird spot where unless you move on from these veterans, there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, obviously you can shore up the bullpen. You know, maybe you go ahead and you acquire like an arm in that rotation. But I mean, a lot of it's just kind of shoring up depth. If you're going to do any buying, you're not going to be trading any significant prospects this season. I mean, I know they have Tommy Edman coming back soon. Uh, where that'll be a big help. But it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to buy in because I mean, if you can keep coasting the way you have been, why buy?
Right. And that's the thing, because of how jumbled it is, I think a lot of these teams might feel the pressure, especially at the top. A team like the Cardinals or the Padres who are right below them, where they're kind of these veteran-led teams with, they're not gonna move off of those veterans, or I'd be
But
shocked if
that's
they moved
what
off
the
of those
Cardinals
veterans.
would have to do is move off of those veterans. That is
Right.
the
But
only
there's
room for
also
upgrade.
right. And I think them and the Padres are both in a similar situation. And if you disagree with me, let me know. But uh, they're both in that situation where they have this core of older guys, right? But they both could, and they both seem like they're going to buy at the deadline. Because they're at the top. They are not at a point where they can be like, oh, maybe we can wait to next season. This is their window for both of the teams. They're gonna buy, but it doesn't feel like it's gonna be an aggressive buy this season from anybody. At least not those two teams. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the Padres can obviously. I think they can make a pretty big splash if they wanted to. Uh, they have a lot more room to upgrade. I mean, you look at like they've got David Peralta as like their starting right fielder. Donovan Solano is their DH right now. Uh, obviously Tatis and Bogarts are on the IL. Uh, there's a lot of room in that rotation. If these guys are going to be out for a while, Darvish and Musgrove, uh, if those guys are going to be out for a while, you're going to have to upgrade if you're going to buy. So there's room. It's just necessarily do they want to make those big splashy moves? I mean, we know the Padres. They not necessarily afraid of
They love making those big splashy moves, and they've done it. They've been the big buyers in the last couple off seasons,
they've
right?
already bought this season. They bought the
Yeah, they got
rating.
Luis Arias,
Yeah,
right? So I don't know how much more buying there is to do, but both the Cardinals and the Padres, who are sitting at the top of the heap right now, they feel like teams that are either going to do nothing or buy. I don't see. They're obviously not going to sell. They're not in a window where they're going to sell and they're not ready to blow it up. Uh, but it's with it being so crowded, I don't know who they're going to buy from with anything really substantial.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, moving out of those wild cards, right? We have we talked about the Mets already. That next group of teams, one and a half back, the Diamondback, the Nats, and the Mets. We talked about the Mets already. The Nats, we talked a little bit about. We talked all about on in the clubhouse that you can go check out. Moral of the story is they're selling, they're not buying. Um, but the Diamondbacks are an interesting team. Obviously, they made the World Series last year, right? And they're a team that is still really young. I don't know what they do here. I don't know if they want to go all in on an asset or if they just want to do nothing and hope that they can get that late season surge like they had last year.
Yeah, I mean for them it's they have a miniature trade deadline in themselves, Uh you hope Zach Gallen comes back from that strained hamstring. You hope Merrill Kelly, his shoulder's feeling better. You hope Eduardo Rodriguez can get back into a spot where he's healthy. You hope that Miguel Castro can come back And I mean, right there, you have a rotation. You had three top of the rotation arms and a setup guy. Like they have
Right.
so much of like their top quality talent on the IL right now, where they have that extra infusion of talent. I mean, obviously they can still go out and get a bullpen out because that's something that they're definitely gonna need. Uh, but I don't know. It's not something that feels where they urgently go out and get that big piece. Where I think that's honestly that's the big issue with this third wild card spot is so many of these teams can kind of just, hey, we're in it, and as long as we make it to the playoffs, our fans are happy. And if enough franchises are like, hey, we're in it, let's just go grab like these little pieces. Let's go trade for Dylan Floro, and we'll that'll be enough. The fans, they'll understand if we make the postseason, and then they get there and they're happy.
Right.
And there are so many teams that can kind of just coast. And I think it makes for a poor product. But I mean, obviously, there's like a month worth of season between now and then. I imagine that this picture gets a little bit more clear by then. If
It's
so,
already
this is going to be
yeah, it's
such a
already starting to get
strange.
more clear, right?
Yeah,
So it's definitely going to spread out more. But it's just right now we're trying to project ahead. It's just there's so many teams right there.
it's
I don't
insane.
know
I mean, the we haven't even mentioned the Reds or the Pirates or the Cubs or the Giants, who are also all within 3 games of that third wild card spot.
right, and those teams are the most interesting ones to me, right? They're the furthest ones out, but if anybody I feel like is going to make a big move, it's gonna be someone from that group, right? The Reds, the Pirates, the Giants, or the Cubs,
It's
right?
gonna
The
be the
Pirates
Cubs.
might be a year, huh?
The Cubs.
Right. Because the Cubs are bought in already. They re-signed Bellinger. They've made a whole bunch of signings this offseason to be back in the playoffs, right? The Giants are in a similar situation, although it's the Giants and the Reds and the Pirates. I I feel like that's the group that's going to buy in. Which you say it's the Cubs. What do you think what do you think the big move is? Or obviously you can't go that far out, but what makes you say the Cubs are going to be the one that makes you make the big move?
I mean, like you said, they're already bought in. Uh, a lot. I mean, you could look at the Pirates. They can say, oh yeah, you know what? We still have our young core. We saw these guys coming up through the system. Like it's next year's our year. Next year's our prove it year. This is just a growing year. Kind of like the Nets are right now, like we talked about on rounding third, or not rounding third, in the clubhouse, getting our shows mixed up. Uh, and the Reds can kind of do the same thing. They're like, hey, we didn't have Matt McLain for the first half of the season. He's that guy that kind of like was he was our powerhouse last season. All the hype was around Elliot de la Cruz, but Matt McLain was the guy that made that Reds team run. Uh, and without him, it's no big deal. We'll when he's healthy, we'll be good again. Uh, but the Cubs, I mean, yeah, they've had their injuries, but you know they have most of their lineup healthy, or I mean, most if not all of their lineup healthy. They have what I would assume is, not maybe not their number one rotation, but they've got one of their best arms out there. They have Shoto Imanaga, Jameson Tyone, Justin Steele, Kyle Hendricks. Like you don't really have a whole lot of excuses, and so these guys need to perform, and they need to go acquire some bullpen help. Uh, and we'll see if they do that.
Yeah. And I think I think the Cubs or the Reds are the team that I'm targeting. The Reds are younger, right? But
Yeah.
they feel like they made for me it feels like they made that big move last year. They called up what, 7 guys or something like that. And I feel like that was them, hey, our window's open, right? And they're hurt a little bit, but they're not too far out. And I feel like now is the time for them to make that big move. There's still plenty of places where that roster can get better, right? And they're going to continue to improve with people coming back from injuries. You mentioned McLean there, right? It's excuse me. It's gonna be an interesting balance because a lot of these teams in this mix are injured. A lot of these teams that we expected to be better are injured, not really underperforming, more injured than anything, and that's a part of baseball. But it's I think the Reds are that team that's going to go make that move because I feel like regardless of how their team is right now, if they can get a guy with some control, maybe sign him right away. They want to build for the future now, and they want to open their window now. And that's the kind of getting more of a sense of urgency out of the Reds than any of these teams.
Yeah, no, I mean I disagree. I think, like I said, I think the Cubs are a team that's gonna have that level of urgency that they need. But I mean I see what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. I think there's teams who have more of a reason to buy in, if that makes sense.
Right. No, definitely. But yeah, no, it's gonna be an interesting wild card race. It's gonna be an interesting trade deadline. I know it's early, but out of these teams, who do you see taking those last two wild card spots?
Last two, I mean, I think the Padres probably hang on. Uh, and I think probably the Cubs, maybe the Diamondbacks.
All right,
How
we'll
about you?
see. Me, I think I think I think it'll be the Padres and the Diamondbacks here. The Cubs. I mean, as much as I feel like they're just underperforming a lot. They've been one of the worst teams in baseball since the first month, right? I don't know. They've been very disappointing, and I maybe they'll turn it around in a little bit, but it's I don't believe in this Cubs team.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. That's the rundown of the NL right now. Obviously, AL is a little bit less crowded over there, and it's not going to be that kind of we don't know what's going to happen. There's still some teams that are climbing over there. Is there anyone in the AL that you think is that you think might make a big move there at the deadline right now?
I mean, it's gonna be those three teams that are just outside right now: Tampa, Houston, and the Rangers, reigning World Series champs. Uh, I mean, Houston quite literally released their big off not this offseason, last offseason first baseman edition, and now they quite literally have no first baseman. Uh, it would make a lot of sense for them to go get somebody like Pete Alonso. Hey, maybe Goldschmidt still got something in him. Let's go trade for Goldie. Uh, hey, let's go get Vlad. If there's a team to do it, I think Houston's probably going to be the most motivated to do it. Uh, I mean, Altuve's not getting any younger. Still a very good baseball player, but I mean, it's Kyle Tucker's towards the end of his team control. Uh, and they're only 2 games below 500. Like, let's go shore up. I mean, that you're talking about a team that's been hurt. That rotation has been demolished. Uh, Jeremy, they have one, two, three, four, five, six starting pitchers on the IL right now. And that's just starting pitchers. They still have four bullpen arms on the IL right now. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
like
No,
it.
it's that pitching staff has been decimated.
Yeah.
Uh, and it has been all season long. You think they get healthy and then no.
No, I mean, and they have room to add still. Like I said, they've got some solid arms. You hope that rotation gets healthy and you just reinforce that lineup. And I think they're still a good team. I think they can. I mean, I think they're a better team than like Boston, who are currently have that wild card three. Uh, and then the Rays just Ray. We talked about it. I think last rounding third, where it's the Rays are gonna make the playoffs. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Uh, and then I mean the Rangers. I don't know. Like I said, they got that core. Like they it's a little disappointing to win the World Series and miss the playoffs. Like I get it, that's all the rage now since 2019. But what's I don't think they want to do that.
No, no, it doesn't feel like something they do. Uh, because they're still got a lot of people coming off injuries over there on their own.
Hmm.
The Rangers do. They just got Max Scherzer back. Uh, maybe DeGrom comes back this season. uh, we'll see. That team should improve. It should rebound. Uh, but no, it's gonna be really interesting to see. Again, it's not. We got another month until the deadline, so this is by no means final, and we'll see some stretching out. But this is as close of a race as I've ever seen. Right? You know, it's gonna be exciting down the stretch.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's
the Rangers need Corey Seager to like wake up, man.
he'll
Corey
pick it
Seager
up.
wakes up, they'll be fine.
He's still sleeping off the World Series MVP.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have anything that we missed so far around the world of baseball for this week?
No, I mean I man, the Edwin Diaz thing really bothered me.
Why is that?
I hate that like it's not fair, man. Like the baseball is like literally like just hurting themselves, you know? Uh like these pitchers, you take away their ability to grip the baseball and then you ask them to throw harder and harder and spin the ball more and more, which causes more strain on their arm, which then, causes them to get injured. But then when they don't do those things, then they don't get to play, and it's just so dumb, man. Like, just give them a better way, a legal way to grip the ball better than just rosin, and then we're good. Like everybody's happy.
Yeah,
Like
there's got to
literally
be a
everybody's
compromise.
happy. I don't know, man. Like it, I feel like if there was a compromise, it would have happened by now.
Yeah,
I
but
feel
that's
like the
complicated.
league is just like no,
The league's
and
not going to
that's
sit down and talk about it, right? This is something that they have to like talk with players and both pitchers and hitters. Obviously, pitchers want the spider tack that
I think they're
you
fine
know.
without that, bro. Like I think they
But,
literally just want to be able to grip the ball.
there has to be some kind of middle ground there where they can.
Also, like,
How
do
long is
the
how long is
umps?
how long have they allowed rosin bags on the back of the mound?
How long have they?
How long has that been back there?
I don't know.
Forever. Over
Forever.
100 years. There've been improvements since rosin was invented.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like I don't know. It's just like I don't know. Like I it just doesn't make sense to me. Also, do the umpires like take a class to determine what's too sticky?
that's the thing that I was
Like it just
trying to figure out, right?
it
Because
doesn't make any sense to me. Like I think this is like I understand that the spider tack was an issue and I agree, and like the really 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 sticky stuff was an issue, but like this just it like the method that they've gone about fixing it is just like it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not seeing something, but
yeah, I mean, a hot day, maybe your hands are just a little too sweaty, and they come and get
and
you.
the
You know?
rosin, and the sunscreen all drips together and then your hands are super sticky.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have. I'm sure they went over some kind of guidelines other than
Yeah.
just touching the hands and stuff.
Massage them very gently.
But now that is something that they should figure out because there is that issue with pitcher injuries that's really been on the uptick recently, and that has a lot to do with it. Obviously, we're kind of reaching the point where we're reaching the limit of the human arm throwing 105, right? We're starting to find that upper limit, and it's starting to become more common.
Mhm.
So there has to be some kind of protections for this. But
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing. There has to be discussions, and the MLB doesn't like to have discussions. Uh,
No. They don't listen to the players. I mean, they reduced the pitch clock even more against against the players. The players all unanimously voted no, and they're like, well, a good thing we gave ourselves more seats than you at the board, and then passed it along. Like it's just stupid.
It's dumb. They'll fix it.
It is.
They won't.
No, love the
But anyway,
sport.
it's a good sport. They'll figure it out 10 years too late. Uh, anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in to rounding third. Remember, go check out the Nats report. Lots of good stuff. We'll be back here next week with all the biggest stories from around the MLB. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus, joined as always by my friend and co-host,
Haden Raymer.
and we will see